Today, we are talking about moving your community to climate action. And join me in welcoming our incredible guests. Mayor Kevin Burns is the longest-serving mayor of Geneva, Illinois. He also chairs the Metropolitan Mayor's Environment Committee for the Greater Chicago area. Councilwoman Hattie Portis-Jones is a member of the Fairburn, Georgia City Council and is also the national chair of the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee for the National League of Cities. So it is really a pleasure to have you both here.
Thank you.
Good to have you. So we're going to get started. We are experiencing multiple concurrent crises, and these crises affect people deeply, individually and collectively. I really applaud your service and both of your willingnesses to confront these multiple challenges. And I know you're trying to balance basic services for your residents and also deal with shrinking budgets. And so let's get our first question. You've both been leaders in bringing diverse groups together to agree on some of the common action and goals toward climate solutions and sustainability. Can you give us some hints or examples of how you've been able to bring people together to the table and to the same page when it comes to climate solutions? And Hattie, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for inviting me to participate in this Let's Talk Climate, and thanks to ecoAmerica for the work that you do. Before I start, I just want to make just one correction. I'm actually former chair of the NLCE and just stepped down, immediate past president. But I approached this topic really from a quality of life perspective. And that has enabled me to really talk to various groups about this, because that's our commonality. We all expect and want high quality of life, and we all have our definition of what that means. So we began at that level, find our common ground. And because of this work, then, I am charged with trying to connect the dots to help people to understand why what it is that they want or they're expecting is affected by the changing climate environment for which we are experiencing. And also, I just want to add that my church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, is a very, very big proponent and is part of the faith component of ecoAmerica. And we are working very diligently all across the world, actually, because we are connectional across the world to delve into this issue and to make an impact upon it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I want to also tell our listeners that we decided before we started that we would be on a first name basis. So thank you, Hattie. And thank you for mentioning our program for faith outreach, which is called Blessed Tomorrow. It's a great name. And so glad that you're working in those areas as well. So Mayor Kevin,
Yes.
Tell us some of the things that you've been doing.
Well, we've been doing a lot, but I have to, in the spirit of giving credit where credit is due, the reality up here in suburban Chicago is, while in part mayors and council members and regional staff leading the charge, the reality is that oftentimes our success and the leverage developed for that success comes from members of the community who encourage us from a purely citizen aspect of, guess what, folks, there's opportunities to make progress. We encourage you to pursue these opportunities on our behalf. And I think we can all acknowledge that demand respectfully is growing and growing almost exponentially. So when I, for example, in Geneva, rely on the counsel and advice of citizen groups like the Natural Resource Commission and others, we tend to do far more good than just a mayor or elected official saying, here's the direction I think we should go, without first consulting with or heeding the advice from those who are really on the ground. So I always have my eyes and ears open to how to do things better, how to do it more broadly, and how to involve more groups. Because I have said this before, folks, and I'll say it again proudly in front of my friends Hattie and Jennifer and others tuning in. If I'm the smartest guy in Geneva, Geneva's in trouble. And we try to seek out those people who know far more than I do and use their advice for the benefit of all.
Well, Kevin, humility is always an admired trait. But you know, you're absolutely right. Our residents, when I was mayor, some of my best ideas came straight from our residents.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and engagement is such an important part of climate action, getting the entire community to move forward. So one of the other things that you both are doing is having to multi-solve. You're having to deal with workforce issues and businesses closing, but try to keep your momentum on some of the sustainability and climate action. So can you tell us a little more about some of the ways you're connecting those efforts and some of the ways you're explaining that to your residents? And we'll start with you, Kevin, this time.
Fair enough, fair enough. In Geneva, like all other communities throughout suburban Chicago, including Chicago, we have developed and put into place our strategic plans that usually last between 5 and 7 years. What I'm proud to announce is that consistently over the last several years, climate sustainability, responsibility, and efficacy has been one of the top goals. So when we face those concurrent challenges of businesses struggling, of utilities struggling, of looking ahead to how the COVID-19 pandemic is going to affect our revenue streams, we also know that what's important and what must remain important is our commitment to the climate. I think Hattie would agree that as we continue to navigate the environment we're in now with respect to COVID-19, the reality is that as we hopefully soon come out of this particular challenge, we don't lose sight of the fact that the long-term goal still must be the climate. If we return to normal, we don't return to better. So let's take this opportunity to address all those issues together. And I think far, far into the future, we'll be far better off. But it's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of focus, and a lot of reminders to ourselves and others that the climate issue is not something that can be set aside. It's something that's integral to everything else.
And I would agree with that. And actually, you know, if there's a silver lining out of all of this, it's the fact that we are all beginning to notice our environment. Right. We are noticing how clean the air is.
Exactly.
You know, and we are seeing animals and birds that I had noticed that they were there, and I've heard others comment about that because they're coming out because it's clean air. And so I think this is an opportunity that has been generated for us to really deal with the climate concerns. That is our challenge, though, is to make sure we don't lose this opportunity. I would also say out of COVID-19, we were able to identify working together as a group, being more collaborative in our endeavors. And I am just so proud to announce that the South Metro elected officials in the Atlanta area has formed a coalition called the Coalition of South Metro Elected Officials that got started out of the COVID-19 challenges. If you all recall, the biggest news was the number of individuals that tested positive in Albany, Georgia, just to the south of us, and the number of people at one time. And it was because it was a family and they were all in attendance at a funeral. And the fact that so many tested positive at the same time and the impact that it had on the healthcare system, the hospital, they needed everything. They just weren't prepared for all of that. And so out of that, the state legislature, Representative William Bodie, to be specific, who is the minority whip, he with several other legislators, Representative Derrick Jackson, got together to raise funds to help, Albany. But out of that came, we have got to keep this going. Here's an opportunity that we can do more for our community. And so we now have this environmental subcommittee, which was never part of the original discussion and plan, but as you continue to discuss and talk about it, you see that these are needs. And so I am just really excited about this coalition and the work that is being planned for our particular area. So just to say, we've got this issue to deal with, but out of it comes opportunity. We just have to be open-minded and be ready to respond.
And Hattie, I understand that this is so brand new that it has a Facebook page, but not a website yet. Like this is kind of your public announcement of your new group, right?
It absolutely is, and I am so proud to be able to do that. And actually, I was just named chair of the environmental subcommittee, and so I look forward to sharing the work that I've done on the national level right here in my backyard. And we've got a community outreach subcommittee, we've got an economic development one, and I believe those are the three at the moment, but ever growing. And it's a coalition of state representatives, state senators, and council members and commissioners, which is fantastic. And it is a diverse group as well.
That's fabulous. And, it's so interesting. Both of you share this regionalism because you're in smaller towns in these bigger metropolitan areas. And Kevin, I know that you have put in tremendous work on your Greenest Region Compact.
Yes.
And we're gonna put that in the chat. That is an extensive document. Can you talk about that document and also the process of pulling 200 and something cities together to support it?
It's an impressive document, and as you and I have discussed before, Jennifer, with Hattie, of course, the credit for this document and the credit for the engagement from hundreds of communities and half a dozen counties and nearly 6 million people represented therein goes to my colleagues and friends, Edith and Cheryl at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. But the reality, and when you synthesize it all, it's about this. We invite every community, regardless of size, to participate in the discussion and to identify their own strengths and weaknesses with respect to greater sustainability moving forward. Some communities have an easier path, some have a more challenging path. Mm-hmm. The bottom line message is this: all of us can do something to improve our own little slice of the world while also recognizing that we're all interconnected. And by being so, we improve the region as a whole. I'm proud to announce, and again, the credit goes to the professional staff, that our volunteer efforts, if you will, is the largest volunteer sustainability initiative in North America.
Wow.
Because of that, we're held perhaps to an appropriate standard, but we're also challenged by that opportunity to prove that we can do something positive. And each and every day, there's an opportunity to do that.
So Kevin, when you say the largest, is that in terms of the number of municipalities, the number of people?
The number of municipalities and people. In fact, there's multiple organizations like this nationwide. We are, quote, #1 in terms of participation. And as a result, we have the opportunity to work with our friends overseas in the European Union. We're working with all sorts of organizations to learn from other regions and learn from other areas of the world. Let's face it, folks, because we do something well here, doesn't mean we can't do something better. And if we don't share each other's successes and challenges and failures, we're all operating in some sort of silo, and that gets us nowhere.
Now, Kevin, I know you're a good storyteller, I can tell. There's got to be a story in bringing all those diverse voices together. There's got to be a story of some particularly difficult issue or some challenge where you had to, not arm wrestle, but
sure.
you had to convince graciously somebody to join in. Do you have any good stories about an issue you can think of?
Well, there's a lot of small towns surrounding Chicago, of course, and there's a lot of large communities. I think the fact of the matter is nobody likes to be told what to do. But if you help me discover what I can do to make a difference, then gosh darn it, I'll walk with you arm in arm to achieve that. So we approach this issue very sensitively with respect to the authority and the autonomy that a lot of communities are proud of. But by showing community leaders and community members and the citizenry at large that guess what, folks, this doesn't take a heck of a lot of work, but we need to make some sort of progress. We're not here to tell you how to do it, but we are here to help you identify opportunities to make that progress. And oftentimes folks will say, fine, you know, Burns, back out of the way, let me do this. I'll show you our success, but doggone it, this is my community. And I totally respect that, totally.
That's terrific. Hattie, you were smiling. Maybe you've got a story that you remember as well.
Well, no, I'm smiling because I can't wait to pick your brains, Kevin, about
well, it's not going to take long,
yes,
Hattie.
the
So
various
that'll be...
strategies that you guys have employed, and I'm smiling because I'm just so excited the fact that I can serve on this panel with you and get to learn what you guys have done. That sounds so exciting, and congratulations on being #1.
Yeah, so the challenge remains.
Yes, yes.
I have to tell you, when communities are trying to think outside of the box, what more they can do, I often point them to that document, Kevin, because it has dozens of pages, and it's your framework. Your framework goes through, you know, housing and workforce and water issues, and with great detail, and there's so many good ideas in there. So I do hope more folks learn that, you know, some of those opportunities. But I want to ask something that is always at issue, and that's funding.
Yes.
So when you're working regionally, one of the things we found, you know, I'm in Charlotte, and one of the things we found was that we had a drought that went up and down different counties. Not every county had the same resources to combat that drought.
Right.
And so it was really hard. You needed state support. So have you found state and federal support that helps cross some of those jurisdictional lines? Either one of you?
Hattie, I'll defer to you, and then I'll chime in as necessary.
Well, what comes to mind, and I mentioned this to you yesterday, Jennifer, is that one of the things that we are really excited about is that the state legislature, after a 10-year battle, was successful in getting language on the ballot to deal with hazardous waste and landfill remediation funding. So the electorate of Georgia passed this additional fee, but the loophole in it was that the state could divert those funds to other things. And that's been an ongoing challenge. And so one of the things we want to work on very diligently is making sure that those funds are dedicated for its purpose. And it turns out that it's not only the hazardous waste funds, but there are others that are like that as well. And people will be interested to hear what those are. So if we can just have access to what has already been granted us, we will be able to do a lot with those funds. In the midst of this COVID-19 and the CARES Act, because we're a small town, and Kevin, I don't know if you're having this problem as well, any funding that comes down from the federal government comes into the state or to the county because of the size. And then now we're having to fight for our share of that pie.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so that's always ongoing, and that is just unfortunate given the size of our city. And that if we were allowed to just have access to the funds that we're already entitled to, we would be able to achieve so much more.
Agreed. Well said. I think adding to our titles is also Golden Glove boxers.
Well, that's true too. That's true too.
But in Illinois, Jennifer, for example, there are 6,000 pieces of legislation introduced annually in the state legislature.
Oh, wow.
The reality is, how do you break through the clutter? I believe breaking through the clutter begins first by demonstrating locally that we're willing to invest the funds necessary to make positive change. And then by demonstrating that in a larger and more scalable format, we can inspire our legislators and our appointed officials that, guess what, this funding not only makes sense, but we can scale it up where it makes sense throughout the region and throughout the state.
Well, you know, Kevin, I agree with that because we're always talking about the one thing I just repeat over and over again is if we could just leverage every dollar, if you will just help us to leverage the dollars that we have, we're not asking for a handout.
Exactly.
We just said, yes, we're asking for that additional support to allow us to maximize the money that we use. Because we put our money where our mouth is.
Right.
When, you know, we decide to do something, we put the money there. But it would go much further if we had the support of higher forms of government.
Well said.
You know, we had an interesting question come in from one of our listeners about funding. And it was directed toward you, Kevin, but you could both answer. And it is, have you, in your work, because you've been working on sustainability and climate action for
Right.
several years, with COVID, with the financial viability, the tax revenues falling, et cetera, are you making amendments to any of existing agreements that are taking into account, clearly you're watching those trust funds and making sure they're directed, continue to be directed as they were originally intended, but are there other adjustments that you have to make to make sure your municipality stays viable, but also that you're supporting more clean energy and other climate action? You know,
That's a great question. The
and that's
balance.
from Martha. Sorry, that's from Martha in Geneva.
Oh, I think I know Martha. Hello, Martha. I think the reality is this, that we have yet to identify, or perhaps not clearly communicate, what that fulcrum is as we try to balance all issues. Now, I believe the fulcrum is this, that if we are successful in navigating COVID-19, yet don't patently, holistically, and comprehensively change how we operate as a community in a region, then I think we've lost an extraordinary opportunity. Mm-hmm. We are experiencing in Geneva and the region and Illinois in general and in the nation and the world more frequent and more serious rain events regularly. We have facilities in Geneva that are over 100 years old. We simply can't keep up. If we are to forgive the investment necessary now because of other challenges, that'll only, I believe, exponentially worsen the environment moving forward. So with respect to energy in general, we have contracts with energy companies that many would perceive as perhaps not entirely appropriate, but we also have built our energy portfolio upwards of 28% overall on renewables. So as we make these incremental changes, we also know that we are on that path to positive, as it were. We are on that path to complete renewability. It's going to take some time. So what do you do in the meantime? You address issues such as building codes. You address issues such as stormwater management, such as permeable use of roadways and what have you. Things that, while alone might seem inconsequential, together they provide an extraordinary benefit. We need to brag more about what we do in that regard, and also never lose focus on the fact that we have other work to do as well.
And I would agree with that as well. We haven't really talked about or done much relative to renewable energy just yet, but the small things that we have done. For instance, speaking of collaboration, we partnered with a community improvement district to develop a park and ride. As you know, transportation is a big issue in the Atlanta metro area. And included in that park and ride, which we just opened earlier this year, are a couple of electric charging stations.
Right.
And we're trying to encourage that. And we've got several new apartment complexes that just opened, and they've included electric charging stations as well. the whole recycling piece, the road work that you spoke of, Kevin, trying to do it best as well. So you're right. In isolation, it doesn't say much, but collectively, it begins to have an impact. And just one step at a time. So as long as we are moving in that direction, that's a great place for us to start.
Right. And Hattie and Jennifer, if I may just chime in regarding another program that costs municipalities zero, and that is a program that we call Soul Smart. And in essence, Soul Smart is about municipalities reducing the complication of installation of solar panels on roofs, whether it be residential or commercial buildings, in such a way that folks can say, here's what I want to do, we sign off, and they do it. In fact, we've had some bumps along the way in that regard, but our region overall is doing extraordinarily well, and Geneva is on that path as well. We have no objection to folks installing solar panels on their roofs. We have no objection whatsoever. We're still tweaking our language because the language is so old that we want to make it smooth sailing, as it were. And Martha, I think, can attest to this, that we've had some challenges locally, but hopefully things are looking a lot better now.
Do you control your utility, or is it privately run, or is it?
We've owned our own utility since the beginning of time, believe it or not. We have run our own utility for well over 120 years.
Wow. And how about you, Hattie? Are you?
Well, we're part of a cooperative. It's called MEAG, Municipal Electric, and I don't remember the other acronyms, and for electricity, and we receive our water from the city of Atlanta. Although we are part of a 3-city authority to develop our own water authority. So, we're trying to become more responsible and have ownership of those. You talked about, Kevin, the ordinances and the codes relative to solar panel. That's an area where we actually need to do a lot of work because we really don't have, our codes are outdated relative to that.
Sure.
And so that's an opportunity for us as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have, ecoAmerica has an ambassador training program where we help people understand how to talk about climate and how to engage more people. And one of the things we talk about is the whole idea of air rights that many cities have not had to worry about. And if you've got solar panels, your neighbor builds a high building that blocks your sun, that's a problem. And so cities are looking at, now we're looking at multiple 3D layers of zoning because of what's going on with solar panels, which is it's a good problem to have that they're being installed. But it's one more thing to add to the complex nature of what cities are dealing with. So tell me a little bit about workforce, because we know that there are more jobs being added in clean energy conservation, et cetera. Tell us some of the things that you're working on in your cities and regions around, especially now that so many folks are unemployed, around training and employment. Either one can go first.
Go ahead,
Hattie, I'll defer to you.
Oh, okay.
Well, so that's an area that we have to look at regionally, actually. But one of the things is there have been several STEM schools that have been developed, and one is under construction right now here in the city of Fairburn, even though the school district is its own separate jurisdiction. And so there are opportunities there in developing the pipeline for the technological aspect of climate and renewable energy. Also working with our technical schools. The state of Georgia is very intentional about what is going on in the technical schools and developing the skill sets that will be necessary for the future jobs that have been identified. And in fact, there's an opportunity, if you're interested in certain careers, you are able to attend the school tuition free. And so, because again, the state is very, very intentional about that. And so that's an area that's continuously growing, continuously being reassessed, and making sure that we're on top of what will be needed in the future to address those issues.
Yeah, Hattie, I was smiling as you talk about the tuition support, which is such a great program that Georgia has.
Yeah.
Because as I shared, I have a son at Georgia Tech, and since I'm in North Carolina, he's an out-of-state student, and he doesn't
Yes.
get he doesn't get to access that. But he has a lot of friends who are on that scholarship program, and it is tremendous. It's so good for the state to have people in those technical skills who are
Right.
being trained.
Well, let me just add, and some people may have issues with this, so we're able to fund that because of the Georgia lottery. And that was the reason for pushing for its passage. I forget how old it is now, but to be able to provide the Hope Scholarship is what it's called for the students here of Georgia. But the funds for the technical skills, that is a separate pot of money. Yes, and that's fairly recent, within the last 5 years, I believe. That has come about. Because as I said, the governor at the time, which was Governor Deal, he was wanting to be very intentional about the trade school skills and being able to fund that, in addition to the filming industry as well.
Terrific. Yes. Yeah. Atlanta is making a lot of films these days.
Yes.
And Kevin, some of the things you're doing on Workforce?
Well, let me echo everything Hattie said. Our partnership here locally with our community colleges, with our industry experts, whether they be electrical engineers, our union members, we have solid support from our state legislature. We have solid support from our federal legislatures. And I think we see, perhaps almost accidentally, that the future of the workforce is not necessarily always what we thought it would be. But as people become more observant of and respectful of what they can do themselves or through their industry, healthy buildings, healthy homes, what have you, we're going to need what we used to call tradespeople, but now become very almost climate surgeons, because they know how to adapt a existing building into something that's more sustainable, an existing home that is more sustainable. And when you elevate that, you're talking about an existing community that's more sustainable. We need to rely on those folks who choose that path as a passion and to help improve our communities locally and, of course, regionally.
So Kevin, have you used that term climate surgeons before? That is brilliant.
No, that just unbelievable. As it just came to me, I think I've had a moment of clarity.
This is why they call you the epic man of climate change. Sorry, I had to get that in there.
Oh yeah, way to go.
But it's terrific. These kinds of innovative ideas, solutions, and framing, people can really aspire to be a climate surgeon and to make those buildings as, energy efficient as possible, as, low utility costs. It's good for renters and for businesses as well to lower those costs. And it's healthier for the environment.
I mean, Jennifer, the average building exists for at least 100 years. If it costs me more to build it right, not only do I earn my money back, I also enhance the quality of life in the community in which it's built. It just makes, I believe, not only sense, but it's simple to the point of duh.
And I would like to add to that. I think what's really great is that a lot of communities are being intentional about saving
Right.
the buildings, the 50, the 100-year-old buildings. You can't be any more greener than that, right? Because that otherwise you'd have to cost to replace and to tear it down. And so a lot of small towns really are trying to, yes, rebuild their downtowns using that existing inventory, which is very exciting because there's some beautiful buildings,
Our listeners today are very interested in energy because we have a couple more questions that have come in around that. And one is from Billy, who wants to know, apart from installing solar panels, what are other incremental infrastructure plans that your community is working on to help prepare for the eventual move away from fossil fuels entirely. So
Got
what
it.
are some of those other things besides solar panels?
Well, I'll address this, and I think I know who Billy is. Billy might very well be a good friend of mine and a resident of Geneva. When you look at the city of Geneva's, and quite frankly, look at any community in Northern Illinois' total energy portfolio, it often leans toward, originally, fossil fuels. We know that. We've seen a change toward a more balanced approach. I mentioned earlier, Geneva's energy portfolio now is balanced with 28% renewables. The reality is this: we will move toward 100% renewables in due course. There's no question about it. We now are testing the market with respect to the cost, the sustainability of that energy being provided, the willingness, and this is a huge issue, folks, the willingness of our residents and business owners willing to pay perhaps a little bit more to help us accelerate getting to where we want to be. And the fact that we have to adjust our own language internally through codes, laws, regulatory authority to allow for that. One thing in Geneva that I think is pretty interesting, and other communities do this, we actually ascertain 10% of our overall energy needs from methane recapture from a closed landfill. Sooner or later, ladies and gentlemen, that landfill is going to no longer produce that methane. And we understand that. So where could we derive that additional renewable energy from? Whether it be wind, whether it be solar, whether it be geothermal. Our new public library built in Geneva is built over 50 different geothermal basins that heat that building. No one will ever see it. Most people will never know it, but the reality is it's there. And that was an investment the library made so that they can be a more responsible building in our community.
Well, I will say, I mean, we're nowhere near that, actually. The conversation, we still need to have the conversation. We still have to do a lot of educating about it. We still have to have the political will in order to undertake such a project. So we're on the opposite end, and hopefully with opportunities like this and exposure to what this might mean, we'll be able to bring both our residents as well as our elected officials along to be willing to undertake this project.
You know, it's interesting, Kevin, you talk about geothermal because a lot of cities haven't explored that to the extent that they could. And somebody pointed out to me recently, as we talk about a just transition for our workers, that some of the skills that oil drilling takes and mining are the same skills you can use with geothermal.
Absolutely.
You know? And, you know, this is, again, we talk about that worker retraining and just transition. You know, I think it's great that your region is so advanced in that area, because I know that, so I've talked to some folks in North Carolina who have tried to get geothermal in, and they can't find the engineers, the assessors, the architects who really understand it yet. So another opportunity for training.
Yeah, and it's fun to boast about too. And again, the reality is that so many good things are being done that when we created the Greenest Region Compact, we were able to discover all that good that's being done and then talk about it more globally, if you will, so that others can copy. Because sharing these ideas is the easiest thing to do.
But you know, it's interesting that you know, there are some things that you're far ahead on, other things that Hattie's far ahead on. And we hear also a lot from smaller communities about, how do I even get started? And so, you know, ecoAmerica and Path to Positive actually put together we call it a moving forward guide that is sort of, you know, basic, what do you need to know, what can you do, how do you really get started, because everybody can start somewhere.
Absolutely.
And what's great to hear in your two communities, even though they're very diverse, there are a lot of similarities, and there are also a lot of different options that you all have really put into place in a positive way, and you still have plans to do a lot more.
Yes.
So
what's so interesting is that we're different regions. Our climates are completely different. The cost of operation is completely different as well.
Right.
And I can relate to you, Kevin, because I'm from Wisconsin.
I know, I
And how
heard.
cold it gets, and yes, and it gets cold early,
Right.
and the expense with heating a home through the entire winter. So
Right.
our challenges are different yet very similar in terms of the motivations.
Agreed.
And that is, it's another great thing that, Hattie, I know you've been very active with the National League of Cities, and that they really bring people together to share those best practices. And hopefully we'll get a lot of people, listening to both of you today who will get some great ideas and take those back to their cities as well. Because
And Jennifer, let me say this, those tuning in and those who might tune in later through the recording, I would say this: challenge your elected leaders, challenge your community volunteers, challenge each other. Because quite frankly, if those in elected office are the only ones responsible for making the decisions, then we're going to make decisions based on information we either do or don't hear from our constituencies.
That's absolutely correct. I've said early on, that's kind of how I got involved in my community. It was from an environmental issue, if you will, if you want to call it that. But I, when my husband and I first moved out here in 1996, there were just lots and lots of trees all around us. Many of the subdivisions hadn't been developed, the new housing construction and all of that. An area where my husband and I walked our dog all the time, loaded with trees. They built houses and they cleared all of the land of every tree. And it was then that I contacted my council person and made an issue about, why do you have to clear every tree? Can you figure out how to work around it so we maintain? Because we know a tree canopy is very, very important to a community and maintaining some of the climate issues that we've talked about. So I want to encourage everybody, please speak up. And you're right, Kevin, we deal with what's in front of us, right? And it's unfortunate, but the loudest voices do get heard. And so if you look at this from a quality of life issue, come say something and let us know what's important to you, and give us your ideas on how you would propose we deal with some of these things.
I want to ask a question following up from that, because it is so important to have residents engaged. How have you both reached out to find voices that maybe haven't been included? We know with all the recent information we've seen that communities of color have been left out of many conversations. We know that immigrants and Native Americans, and there's so many other groups that really have not been at the table enough. And you've both got very diverse communities. Are there particular things that or methods that you have followed to really try to bring more of those voices to the table and early in the process? Hattie, we'll start with you.
Well, I mean, like I said early on, my perspective in talking about this really is a quality of life issue. Health is all around us. And unfortunately, the health issues in my community are they're overwhelming. And the smallest interruption or disruption cause major havoc to our community. And so I'm constantly talking about it from that perspective. We all want, again, clean air. And this community, we love our trees, we love our parks. We want access to that. We want to maintain the property values in our community. So anything that may affect that. So when an issue presents itself, that becomes an opportunity to have a conversation, about how it affects our quality of life and what it means from a climate perspective. And again, it's the continuously connecting the dots about what it is that we want in terms of our quality of life and what things are impacting our ability to have that.
And Mayor Kevin?
What I've learned most is from the regional connectivity that we have through the Greenest Region Compact. And while I will admittedly acknowledge and share with everyone, and particularly those tuning in, Geneva is not a community of great diversity. In fact, it really never has been. But as you get outside of the community of Geneva and you travel east in particular, or even further west, you have the opportunity to meet with individuals who are, quote, different than us and have experienced inequity with respect to not only the long-term climate issue, but of course the placement of certain industries within their communities that have just exacerbated the issue. And while we have been spared by those sorts of decisions in theory, we cannot ignore the fact that if we're going to work as a region, then we darn well better be paying attention to these inequities moving forward. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in the same position in 25 years, 10 years, 15 years from now that, guess what? Let's put all those things that are thought to be not terribly attractive to community somewhere else. And the best way to address that is to stop building those things and find out other opportunities that makes the entire region a desirable place to live, irrespective of how the energy is drawn.
And let me just add, land is finite.
Right.
Our environment where we live, it is finite. You know, we can't obtain land anyplace else. So it is incumbent upon us to be good stewards of what we have, because this is all we have. This is all we have. And so continuing to talk about that message, and that we've got to pay attention to this, and that one community is not immune from another.
Exactly.
We're connected. And so thank you so much, Kevin, for the work that you guys do from the regional perspective in your area.
It's a pleasure.
You guys are mutual fans, and it's great. It's great to see the connection, even from the Milwaukee connection. But absolutely, and some of the same challenges. It sounds almost too good. Your regional collaboration sounds almost too good to be true. There have to be some. there have to be some issues that were particularly sticky.
There always is. Always is. I mean, here's one big issue right now, Jennifer and Hattie, for your benefit as well. Geneva owns its own utility. However, a vast majority of communities within the Greenest Region Compact are part of the Commonwealth Edison utility system. So I come from a different perspective. So while oftentimes communities want to, and individuals in particular, want to bash the big bad utility, I own, as a trustee of that utility, what some people sometimes want to bash. So it's a very fine line. And communities are so different. We can fly over a community in a, ideally, electric Airbus 300, and we all look the same. But when you go underground in these communities, you see the differences in what they truly are. Where you get energy from, how that energy is distributed, who gets what are the rates? Why is one community all industry and one community is all homes? All that stuff comes into play. And it's fascinating from a purely apolitical perspective.
So how are you dealing with that, Kevin?
I ignore it all, quite frankly, and ask Edith to deal with it. No, the reality is learning firsthand what those challenges are, and ideally applying a regional approach as best we can, recognizing that sometimes just because we take an overlay of a regional approach, it ain't gonna benefit everyone equally. So when we come with one voice, our voice is this: how do we achieve greater sustainability moving forward? And then we encourage, we invite, we inspire those communities to not only figure it out themselves, but then share those success stories so that other communities can benefit from those examples. Because we can't all do it the same, we know that. But we all have the same goal, sustainability, a more respectful environment, a more long-term solution. I think that has so far made sense.
Wow, you've already answered my last, I was going to ask your last question, what gives you hope that we're going to continue to move forward? You just answered that. So I'm going to ask another audience question. You have a lot of listeners today, Kevin. This is also from Tom in Geneva. And since you run your utility, are you considering time of use or tiered rates as a way to conserve electricity?
We already have time of use, and we do have tiered rates. Something that we're pretty proud of in Geneva, and it's not a regulatory issue. It is a voluntary issue with respect to peak power days. And I've shared this throughout the region, and Hattie, you might find this interesting as well. Today, we're expecting some warm temperatures here in Geneva and throughout the Chicago region. In Geneva, for example, we will send out a tweet, Facebook post, all social media channels saying, guess what, folks, it's gonna be hotter than you know what in Geneva today. We ask you as citizens and business leaders to reduce your usage during these particular peak hours. And the support from our community and our business leaders is unbelievable, because the less we use becomes a financial benefit to the community, the less we have to buy on the open market. So by turning up your thermostat or delaying washing your clothes or whatever the case might be, we're saving ourselves as owners of the utility money. And let's face it, and the bottom line oftentimes is, what can I save? You know, don't call me an environmentalist. Call me somebody who saved $50 by participating in this program. That's fine. Label yourself as you wish. But the environmental and financial aspects are, I believe, the same.
I can see why you've been successful at bringing people together across, different sides of the table, because absolutely it's the co-benefits that
It is.
we know. Yes, that healthier for the air and the water, less cost with renewable energy, cleaner environment, better jobs, clean jobs as opposed to coal that is so unhealthy, even for the workers. So there's a little bit of cost in the transition, for sure.
Of course, there is. No question about it.
But you're absolutely right. In the end, it's win-win. And so now, Hattie, I'm going to ask you the question that Kevin answered before I asked him. And that is, what gives you hope? What gives you inspiration in this time of multiple challenges? What gives you hope that your community is going to continue to move forward on its climate solutions?
Well, as I said earlier, I am extremely excited about the coalition that was recently formed. And it was formed for one reason, to address COVID-19 and some of the issues our communities were having relative to that. But what has come out of that are these other needs that we have identified. And the fact that this environmental subcommittee was established and that we've got this collaboration with the state legislators, our county commissioners, as well as fellow council members in various cities, is truly exciting. And so that is just a major first step for us, and lots of voices that will be able to carry these messages that are out there. And so I am very hopeful that this will allow us to move this conversation forward and to implement action.
Well, it is so great to spend time with leaders like yourselves who have been able to keep moving your communities forward, who have done it collaboratively, who've done it in the midst of multiple crises. We all need hope right now and inspiration, and you all have delivered that, multiple layers of that. So I just want to say how much I've appreciated your time today. You all are amazing leaders, and I hope that you continue to lead and be supported in your communities. And all the listeners out there, if you're in their communities, please keep them in office.
Yeah.
and please vote this fall, because voting is an incredibly important part of citizen engagement and how you can have a voice as a citizen in your future. So absolutely, I always have to get the voting in there. We actually have a voting resource on our website at ecoamerica.org, so you can go to various different places and make sure you're registered, make a plan to vote, and then do it. So any last words before I close us out between Hattie and Kevin? Just want to say
Just a big thank you to you, Jennifer and Hattie. I'm honored with your friendship, and I look forward to hanging out with you soon when you make it north, and if I make it south, I'll look you up. How's that?
Absolutely, Kevin. And
Excellent.
it's been an honor to serve alongside you in discussing this issue. I've learned a lot from what a small town can do,
Right.
and which is huge. And Jennifer, thank you so much, and the work of ecoAmerica. I've watched several of your Let's Talk Climate series, and they are absolutely fantastic. So great idea. Keep it going. Keep it going. And thank you. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you to the staff for making all of this work.
Absolutely. I've had a lot of helpers filling the chat with resources, and when the recording is complete, you can watch it. The chat will also be recorded, so you can file those resources later and find them again. And we have covered quite a bit, but truly, people know our leaders are facing a lot of challenges, but you have demonstrated that in the midst of all that, we're able to make progress. And absolutely, we all need to be part of that progress.
Agreed.
So I just want to let everyone know that our Let's Talk series continues, and thank you, Hattie, for pointing out that all the past episodes are available as well. Next week on July 23rd, we'll be listening to Successful Public Health Campaigns, How to Win on Climate, and that will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can always engage with us online with the hashtag Let's Talk Climate. Be sure to subscribe for our newsletters and our blogs, and you'll find the latest on thought leadership, resources, and episodes on climate action and advocacy. So from all of us here at ecoAmerica, we thank you. We appreciate your time. Stay well, stay safe. See you on the 23rd, and don't forget to wear your mask.
Well
Thank
said.
you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.